I will tell you, as the lead federal government agency for election infrastructure security, I've traveled the country meeting with election officials of both parties. And they work tirelessly every day to ensure that every one of their citizens' votes are counted as cast. It's why I have such confidence and why I can say election infrastructure has never been more secure.
Hi again, everyone. Those are the facts. A message of confidence from Jen Easterly, whose job it is to protect our election systems from fraud and from interference, stressing to all voters, especially ones who have been fed a constant stream of lies about the election for years now, that their votes will be counted and the results will be free from fraud and accurate. We are just 12 days out from the first presidential election post Donald Trump's big lie about voter fraud in the 2020 election. And the ex-president and his allies have already begun laying the foundation to contest the results of this election. It's been going on for a long time, spreading falsehood after falsehood about the security of our elections and flooding the zone with legal challenges to this election result. According to our friend, election rights attorney Mark Elias, there are 196 active voting and election cases pending in 40 states right now. NBC News reports about these brought by Republicans. Quote, many suits have sought to purge voter rolls or bolster signature and voter ID requirements or invalidate ballots that don't meet them, while others have looked to revamp different aspects of election administration, including reducing the use of ballot drop boxes and instituting unusual vote counting protocols, like requiring that ballots be counted by hand. But as Danielle Lang, the senior director at the Campaign Legal Center, a nonpartisan voting watchdog group, points out, Republicans don't even need to win these suits to do harm. She says this, quote, what we are seeing now that is really troubling is a set of lawsuits being filed so very close to an election that are trying to change the rules of the road in a way that would disenfranchise voters. A lot of this litigation is, quite frankly, not designed to succeed. It's just designed to create confusion and chaos, she added. It will be during this confusion and chaos when the ex-president and his allies will be able to do the most damage to our democracy and to faith in our elections. But Vice President Kamala Harris told our colleague Hallie Jackson that she's ready to take on whatever comes.
Well, let me say this. We've got 2 weeks to go, and I'm very much grounded in the present in terms of the task at hand, and we will deal with election night and the days after as they come, and we have the resources and the expertise and the focus on that as well.
So you have teams ready to go? Is that what you're saying? Are you thinking about that as a possibility?
Of course. This is a person, Donald Trump, who tried to undo a free and fair election, who still denies the will of the people, who incited a violent mob to attack the United States Capitol, and 140 law enforcement officers were attacked. Some were killed. This is a serious matter.
It's where we start the hour with some of that expertise. Voting rights attorney and founder of the site Democracy Docket, Mark Elias. His firm has been retained by the Harris campaign ahead of the election. Sometimes we have to zoom through the things that worry you most. I wanted to sort of go through them and have you explain them to us. So just take me through, sort of your top hot spots.
Yeah. So look, the first thing for people to keep in mind is that people are already voting, and we are seeing the voting process succeed. People are able to get their ballots, are able to return those ballots, and with the exception of the minor hiccups that you normally expect, things are going well. What the first thing we are seeing, which we have talked about for some time, Nicole, you and I, is a mass effort by Republicans to flood the courts with frivolous litigation to try to sow chaos. But let's be clear. Though there have been a record number of lawsuits filed, though there have been a record number of lawsuits by Republicans filed, they have also suffered a record number of defeats. Just yesterday, they lost a case in the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. They lost a case in the Georgia Supreme Court the day before that. The day before that, they lost a case in Michigan. They lost a case last week in Nevada. Their allies lost 3 cases last week in Nevada. They have lost cases throughout this country at an extraordinarily fast clip, and it is proof that the courts are holding. So I worry about to answer your question, I worry about first and foremost, that they create a sense of disorder and chaos and threat where people should have confidence in their ability to vote and that their votes will be counted.
I want to read for you, Mark, the new piece of reporting from Bart Gellman in Time magazine this morning. Quote, one significant obstacle for Trump if he tries, as he did in 2020, to arrange for alternative electors in states he loses, is that he would need active collaboration from a governor to throw out a state's popular vote. Reforms to the Electoral Count Act give governors the presumptive power to decide which electors represent their states. 5 of the battleground states this year, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Arizona, have Democratic governors. Just take me through what should give people hope and faith as we head into the final stretch.
Yeah, so 2 things. First of all, on that point, you know, the ultimate certification document that goes from a state to the Congress for the Congress to then count on January 6th is what's called a certificate of ascertainment, and it is signed by the governor of that state. And as he points out, not only have there been structural reforms in the Electoral Count Reform Act, and not only have criminal prosecutions, I think, probably played a deterrent effect on Republicans pulling these shenanigans again. But as he points out, the governors in these battleground states are not election deniers. Even Brian Kemp, who I have my serious disagreements with, he did his duty last time and he signed the certificate of ascertainment. So I think that they have run out of runway there. Also, let's not forget that we've talked a lot about what Donald Trump was able to do on January 6th. That was in part because he was in the White House, and he's not in the White House this time. We've talked about what Mike Pence did that was right. But honestly, let's remember that it will be Kamala Harris now, not Mike Pence, who we will not have to worry about with any kind of false certification. So those are all good news. The other thing that people need to realize is that there are teams of lawyers, myself being one of them, but only one of many, who are right now in court protecting your voting rights. We are prepared to protect an accurate count in the post-election. We are prepared, as we did in 2020, to fight dozens and dozens of lawsuits that Donald Trump may throw at us and make sure they are all defeated so that in the end, every lawful ballot is counted and accurate results are certified. It may not always be pretty day to day in what the news is reporting, but I promise you those fights will take place and we will win.
Okay, so we've dealt with the legal, we've dealt with the state houses. Let's deal with sort of the intangible piece, right? What is happening and what people are doing is that the threat to purge rolls would mean that a vote would not be necessarily legal, and that scares people. We talk about sort of the Republicans' sort of overt voter suppression efforts and then the more subversive ones.
Yeah, so you and I talked about this months ago. I said they had a 3-part plan. One is to make it harder to vote. The second was to challenge voters and harass election officials. And the third was to try to monkey with certification. So we've seen some of their voter suppression efforts, and those have been in court and elsewhere. And we are seeing that second part, as we talked about their efforts to challenge voters. And there are different ways they can do that. One is they can try to purge them from the rolls. The other is they can try to challenge them in mass lists. But look, just in the last few days, they have lost these cases. They are losing case after case after case. The state of Texas and the state of Florida are going to federal court right now to try to force the federal government into helping their purge efforts. They're going to lose those cases. The Department of Justice sued Alabama, and Alabama lost that case. The Department of Justice has sued Virginia. Virginia is going to lose that case. The fact is that these efforts by Republicans to purge voters and to challenge voters are going to fail. And what we cannot have people is worry that their vote won't count, because the cynics want you to think that they are going to succeed. The cynics want you to believe that nothing you can do can protect a free and fair election. And I'm here to tell you they are wrong. If you show up to vote, you're going to be, and you're properly registered, you're going to be allowed to vote, and there's going to be people fighting to make sure it's counted.